everyone, I'm Anya Parampil, and you're watching Redlines. Former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton's much-anticipated tell-all, The Room Where It Happened, has arrived. And in what seemed like a congratulatory gift, ABC's Martha Raddatz recently produced a multi-part advertisement for the book in the form of a sit-down interview with its author. The primetime discussion was complete with supporting analysis from ABC's top correspondents.
Aggressive promoter of a hawkish, strong projection of American power around the world.
As well as dramatic voiceovers featuring Bolton himself reading quotes from the book.
Putin struck me as totally in control, calm, self-confident, totally knowledgeable on Moscow's national security priorities.
In kicking off his book tour with Raddatz, Bolton was given an opportunity to pitch his story to the public. Raddatz starts the interview by prompting him to do just that, asking the former national security advisor, why is this the book President Trump doesn't want anyone to read? The entire interview is not available online as video. However, there is a complete transcript on the ABC website, so I'll be sharing some important parts as text. Early on in the conversation, Bolton explains that he first grew weary of the president's decision-making process on his first day in the Oval Office, due to the fact Trump wavered on how exactly to bomb Syria. You may remember that on April 7, 2018, the U.S. government and its European allies accused Syria's government of carrying out a chemical weapons attack in the city of Douma. John Bolton officially joined the White House National Security Team the following day, telling Raddatz, quote, "We responded by the end of the week, but I have to say it was a very disappointing process we went through." Going on to say, "I felt that while the main purpose of the strike was to reestablish the deterrent against the use of chemical weapons that had failed after the previous strike 1 year before, we didn't really establish that deterrent. And it was very hard to get the president to focus on the objective of the strike and what the implications were." But let's recap what exactly happened with that strike. On April 14th, roughly a week after the alleged attack was supposed to have taken place, the US, UK, and France carried out airstrikes against Syria, including against a scientific research center in its capital. Many journalists, analysts, and diplomats outside the US sphere of influence questioned the veracity of the claims against the Syrian government at the time, pointing out the US and its allies had responded militarily before international observers from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons had even arrived in Syria. Here's a report I filed for RT America shortly after the US response. Pay special attention to the information regarding the research center which the US and its allies bombed.
The timing of the visit underscores serious questions about the U.S.-led attack. Most importantly, why such strikes would be carried out against a sovereign nation before an investigation into the alleged chemical weapons attack even took place. The strikes took place in the early hours of April 14th, targeting a research facility in Damascus, as well as a Syrian military base in Homs, where the U.S. charges the Syrian government hid chemical weapons. RT spoke with one technician who worked at the Barzeh research facility in Damascus. He says the OPCW found no violations at the center during previous visits.
You can see that nothing has happened here. I've been here myself since 5 a.m. There are no signs of chemical warfare agents. This is a civilian facility, and drugs and chemicals production technology was developed here for peaceful economic purposes. The OPCW visited this facility several times, carrying out several thorough inspections. The organization received a lot of help in its work, and so did the members of its teams. There was even a special place on the site allocated for the OPCW, so they could collect and package samples taken from places that had to be inspected.
If Bolton was disappointed with that response, we have to ask what exactly would satisfy his appetite for war. More dead civilians? But notice the U.S. directly targeted a lab which provided assistance to the OPCW, the organization tasked with investigating Washington's allegations against Syria's military. Why would it do that? Considering multiple OPCW whistleblowers have since stepped forward to explain the U.S. pressured them to cook intelligence regarding the alleged chemical attack in Douma, even testifying that it never took place, that bombing sure does look suspicious. Syria was also a focus for Bolton during Trump's historic summit with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Bolton tells Raditz that during lunch directly following the meeting, which took place in July 2018, Trump and Putin discussed the Middle East. He said the Russian president, quote, could tell what he wanted was the United States out of Syria, and Trump was moving in that direction. Let's listen to what else Bolton said at the summit.
At the end of the summit, Trump and Putin held a press conference that would make headlines around the world.
President Trump and Vladimir Putin have just concluded their one-on-one meeting.
During today's meeting, I addressed directly with President Putin the issue of Russian interference in our elections. I felt this was a message best delivered in person.
You said you were frozen in your seat watching that.
I thought I wouldn't get up. I didn't know what to do.
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
We had the famous press conference, and the equivalency that the president described, he says because he was misunderstood, to what our intelligence was saying about Russian interference in American elections and Vladimir Putin's denial. It was a stunning moment.
So believe it or not, I was actually in the room for that historic press conference as part of the White House press corps, which means I was stuck in an extremely controlled environment with all of your favorite White House correspondents, from Jim Acosta to Kelly O'Donnell, and had to suffer through these journalists joking about Putin and Trump running late to the press briefing because they were having sex, and denouncing the meeting as treasonous. How dare the President of the United States meet with his Russian counterpart? But I digress. The point is that in the lead up to the summit, many people were hopeful the event would come to signify a new era in U.S.-Russia relations. But all of that went out the door before the planes had even landed in Helsinki. See, on July 13th, just 3 days before the summit was scheduled to take place, Special Counsel Robert Mueller indicted 12 Russian military intelligence officers, accusing them of hacking the DNC as well as the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton. The Justice Department did not release any evidence to prove its accusations. In fact, the FBI had yet to even analyze the DNC's hacked server, and the case has yet to yield results even to this day. But the damage was done. The indictment was designed specially to cast a shadow over the Trump-Putin meeting. When it was finally time for the historic press conference, the atmosphere was so politically charged that only 4 questions, 2 from U.S. wire services and 2 from Russian media, were allowed. And while the Russians asked about actual policy, Syria and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, the U.S. side could only focus on Mueller's indictment. Yet many of them overlooked the fact that Putin actually said he was willing to collaborate with Washington's investigation.
Being on the American side of the press event today, Holland, was a little bit like being in a jungle of parrots. All you could hear was indictment, indictment. Russia hacked our democracy or attacked us. You could even hear people making allegations like that during the 2016 presidential election. No discussion of Korea, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or Iran deal, Syria, Ukraine, nuclear power, or any other issue these two very powerful world leaders may have been discussing. But when the question of this latest indictment was raised, President Putin actually said he's willing to cooperate with Mueller's investigation.
We can offer that the appropriate commission headed by Special Attorney Mueller. He can use this treaty as a solid foundation and send a formal and official request to us so that we would interrogate and hold the questioning of these individuals who he believes privy to some crimes. And our law enforcement are perfectly able to do this questioning and send the appropriate materials to the United States. Moreover, we can meet you halfway. We can make another step. We can actually permit the official representatives of the United States, including the members of this very commission headed by Mr. Mueller. We can let them into the country and they will be present for this questioning. But in this case, there is another concession. This kind of effort should be a mutual one.
Of course, Putin's will to strengthen U.S.-Russia ties bore no fruit. Mere hours after the Helsinki meeting, the U.S. Justice Department indicted Russian national Maria Butina with conspiracy to act as a foreign agent of Russia, in yet another bid to sabotage the thawing of relations. Within months, Bolton and the intelligence community had their way. The Trump administration had gone so far as to withdraw from Cold War-era arms reduction treaties, and the hope of Helsinki seemed like a distant memory. But that was not the only summit Bolton worked to undermine. Another focus of Bolton's was Trump's initiative to hold peace talks with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Here's what he had to say.
Kim sent the president an oversized love letter.
He wrote me beautiful letters, and they're great letters.
It was the beginning of the bromance. Do you think he really believes that Kim Jong-un loves him?
I don't know any other explanation.
John Bolton saw the bargaining firsthand, behind closed doors. In this photo, see him in the lower right corner. He is there in the room where it happened. Take us inside that room. The press mob, as you call them, comes in. As soon as they leave, you say the flattery began with Kim Jong-un.
Well, every president has a style, but the idea that just this oleaginous layer of compliments to this brutal dictator would convince him that you could make a deal with Donald Trump, I thought was both strikingly naive and dangerous. He told Kim Jong-un we would give up what he called the war games on the Korean Peninsula. The president didn't seem to understand that the war games, as he called them, were critical to American and South Korean ability to be ready to withstand pressure from North Korea and to pull down these engagements, these exercises, because they displeased Kim Jong-un, I just thought was an act of folly.
Let's stop there for now. Having reported from South Korea, I can confidently say that those military drills are not designed to keep anyone safe. They are nothing but a dress rehearsal for the invasion of the DPRK and all-out war on the peninsula. The cancellation of these war games would have been good for peace, and therefore bad for Bolton. Let's continue.
Did you tell him at any time about the things you're now telling the world?
Well, I certainly tried to. I said at one point, Mr. President, he's the dictator of a rat little country that doesn't deserve a meeting with you. The president's response to that was, you have a lot of hostility. Of course, I have more hostility, but you have a lot of hostility.
A rat shit little country? How odd that Bolton is not ashamed to admit to using such language, even now that he's a hero of the so-called anti-Trump resistance. And indeed, Bolton did everything in his power to cripple peace efforts with DPRK. Trump and Kim's meetings culminated with a summit in Hanoi, where many journalists and observers expected a formal agreement between the two leaders would be signed. Kim himself was certainly hopeful, taking a dramatic train ride from DPRK to Vietnam over 2 days, setting the stage for a historic conference. But once again, all hopes were dashed. The meeting was cut short and no deal was announced. Brian Becker, founder of the Anti-War Answer Coalition, attended the earlier Trump-Kim summit in Singapore, as well as the Hanoi meeting, as a member of the press. In an op-ed for CGTN, he explained, quote, "The euphoria that followed the Singapore summit meeting came to a crashing end on the second day of the follow-up summit that took place in Hanoi, when President Trump offered the DPRK a take-it-or-leave-it demand to give up its entire nuclear arsenal in exchange for the future lifting of economic sanctions by the United States. It is noteworthy that special White House envoy Stephen Biden, who had publicly accepted the DPRK's negotiating stance of incrementalism and reciprocity, had been pushed to the backbench on the second day of the Hanoi summit and replaced by notorious anti-DPRK hawk John Bolton, who was then the national security advisor to Trump. Under Bolton's stewardship, the terms abruptly changed at the Hanoi summit, and Pyongyang was offered a deal that Bolton knew they would never accept. Now, you don't have to believe Trump is a dove in order to recognize Bolton's unique and singular hand in sabotaging peace with DPRK. So what if Trump was simply driven by the prospects of winning the Nobel Peace Prize or the desire to be remembered for cutting an important deal as president? The reality is the peace initiative promised tangible results for the people of Korea. With the space created by these talks, North and South Korea were allowed to make historic amends, with leaders from the two Koreas even signing an agreement in September of 2018, vowing to submit a joint bid to host the 2032 Summer Olympics, create rail and road links between North and South within the next year, stop military drills aimed at each other along the military demarcation line, remove 11 guard posts in the demilitarized zone by the end of the year, and normalize the Kaesong industrial complex and Kumgang tourism project, permitting more direct cooperation on the peninsula. Bolton's analysis of the situation completely leaves out the perspective of South Korea, which the US has treated like a military colony since the Korean War came to an unofficial end. Perhaps that's why South Korean officials have slammed Bolton's account, with President Moon Jae-in's office releasing a statement describing the book as distorted, going on to say it, quote, represents a violation of the basic principle of diplomacy, which could harm the sincerity of future negotiations very seriously, according to South Korean media. And that's exactly what Bolton's book is meant to do: undermine confidence in current and future diplomatic efforts, whether they be conducted by the Trump administration or the next one.